Hello and welcome. You're listening to Rogue Resistance, a podcast in support of ORD2 Indivisible. I'm your host, Rhonda Nowak. Fellow Oregonians, I want to tell you in no uncertain terms, we are living through an authoritarian takeover of American democracy. It's not teetering on the edge, it's not at risk. Authoritarian governance is happening right now, and corruption is its weapon of choice. For this episode, I'm launching a new segment called Rogue Reads, where I crack open a selection of important books that help us understand the shitstorm swirling around us. Today, I'm discussing Pulitzer Prize-winning author Anne Applebaum's insightful book, Autocracy Inc. She shows us that autocracy feeds on corruption and loyalty networks, a pattern. So let's begin by shedding light on the word corruption. It comes from the Latin corrumpere, meaning to break apart or spoil. Originally, it referred to literal decay, as in rotting or corrupted flesh. Today, it usually means political decay, rotten leaders breaking laws, norms, and public trust to serve themselves and their associates. Applebaum's main point in her book is that modern autocracies work through networks of loyalty, greed, and disinformation that cross national borders. Trump isn't just influenced by this autocratic network, he's a part of it, and he doesn't try to hide it. He openly idolizes Putin, courts Viktor Orban, and praises Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He just slapped Brazil with 40% tariffs, which Americans will end up paying with coffee prices, and he did this because his ally, former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, was arrested for attempting to steal the election in 2022. Trump's authoritarian regime isn't an American aberration. It's an American franchise of Autocracy Inc. I've taken creative liberty to turn Applebaum's conceptual framework into a monster called authoritarian corruption. Any resemblance to a real person is entirely coincidental, of course. This orange-faced fiend with a comb-over has 6 appendages, and another teeny tiny one if you look really hard. Appendage number 1 is kleptocracy, 2, abuse of power, 3, election fraud and voter suppression, 4, peddling influence and trading favors, 5, nepotism and cronyism, and 6, constitutional subversion. Together, these 6 arms of the authoritarian corruption monster are strangling American democracy. Let's break it down. In the last episode of Rogue Resistance, I focused on kleptocracy. I showed how Trump uses public office as his personal ATM. Secret Service stays at Mar-a-Lago, foreign dignitaries funneling money through his hotels, selling all kinds of merch, shaping economic policy to benefit his family's Bitcoin venture. The list goes on and on. Trump's branch of Autocracy Inc. is organized theft dressed up as governance. But that's only one arm of the authoritarian corruption monster. The second arm is abuse of power, otherwise known as Trump's favorite pastime. Applebaum could have written this chapter about Putin's Russia, except I bet Putin's jealous of how brazenly Trump abuses his power. For instance, Trump's DOJ has made no bones over its firing of over 40 career prosecutors, the people who investigate public corruption, election crimes, civil rights violations, and white-collar fraud. You know, the boring folks who keep democracy from collapsing. They're gone. Why? Because loyalty trumps the law every single time in Trump's authoritarian playbook. And he hasn't stopped there. Trump's axed 200 more staffers across the DOJ, including attorneys in fraud and corruption units. He's gutted the public integrity section, the division literally designed to police corrupt officials, down to 5 lawyers. That's a perfect number if you never plan to investigate anything. And remember inspectors general, the watchdogs who sniff out waste and abuse across federal agencies? Trump fired 17 of them in one night. Oversight of this administration isn't just dead, it's buried without a headstone. Meanwhile, DOJ attorneys are resigning in protest after being ordered to drop corruption charges against Trump allies. One called it the new Saturday Night Massacre. Personally, I think that's insulting to Nixon. At least he had the decency to look sneaky while he did it. Folks, what we have here is a hostile takeover of the justice system. And spoiler alert, the DOJ isn't fighting back. And just to put a bow on it, Trump's DOJ is now reinvestigating James Comey, the former FBI director he fired for refusing a loyalty pledge, and John Brennan, Obama's CIA director who called out Trump's ties to Russia, and James Clapper, the former director of national intelligence who publicly warned about Russian election interference. Even more recently, Trump fired 3 senior FBI officials who were deemed insufficiently loyal. He also fired the chief commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics because he didn't like the disappointing jobs report that she released to the public in July. With only hand-picked loyalists left in charge, Americans can now rest easy knowing every official fact from our government will be about as trustworthy as a campaign promise. The third arm of corruption that Applebaum talks about in Autocracy Inc. is nepotism and cronyism. Americans have certainly watched as Trump has surrounded himself with family and friends who couldn't pass a basic civics test. Forget resumes, Trump hires like it's a loyalty rewards program, all while claiming he's draining the swamp and prioritizing merit in the federal government. Right. Hungary's authoritarian leader Viktor Orban filled his government with party hacks. Americans' authoritarian leader does it with family members, golf buddies, and lots of Fox newscasters. The result's the same, though. Democratic institutions have become private businesses run by Trump's family and friends. Trump rewards his cronies like it's Black Friday. Kash Patel was handed the FBI director job, and Linda McMahon got education secretary. Both received massive stock packages worth more than $779,000 each, even though their main resume bullet is, "I'm loyal to Trump." Meanwhile, Emil Bove, Trump's personal lawyer turned fixer at the DOJ, was just confirmed to the Third Circuit bench for life, even after saying the DOJ would need to consider telling the courts "fuck you" to orders blocking the deportation of undocumented immigrants. Bove's confirmation by the Republican-held Senate represents the beginning of a MAGA judiciary. Let that sink in. Applebaum spells all this out in Autocracy Inc. Autocrats don't want experts. They want people who owe them, need them, and never say no. Who needs competence when you've got obedience? The fourth arm of corruption is election fraud and voter suppression. Rig the game so you never lose. In the last couple of months, as Trump's approval ratings have reached record lows, his DOJ has blasted out letters to 19 states demanding their voter rolls, election procedures, and ballot data. The DOJ's even pushed to inspect voting equipment. But let's be clear, this is not about voter security, it's about voter suffocation. Meanwhile, in Texas, Republican leaders backed by Trump are redrawing district maps to capture 5 more House seats, prompting Democrats to flee the state and threats of arrest from the Texas governor. The MAGA plan is to corrupt the election process by disenfranchising voters, primarily people of color. Apparently, democracy is now a coloring contest to see which Republican is best at drawing out of line. In Autocracy Inc., Applebaum warns that modern autocrats love elections. They just rewrite the rules until the ballots become mere stage props. From Hungary's gerrymanders to Russia's sham votes, it's all the same playbook, with Trump the lead actor in the American version. The fifth arm of corruption is peddling influence and trading favors. Trump's influence peddling looks less like policymaking and more like pay-to-play bingo. From receiving planes as illegal gifts from Qatar, as I discussed in episode 3, to dropping corruption cases for the likes of Eric Adams and dangling a Maxwell pardon like a get-out-of-jail card for sex traffickers who cooperate. Applebaum calls this transactional autocracy, where favors replace laws and loyalty is currency. Welcome to the Trump empire. Let's dig a little deeper into a few of these examples of trading favors. First, of course, is Elon Musk. Musk was handed the reins of Trump's so-called Department of Government Efficiency, where efficiency really meant slashing agencies and rolling back regulations, particularly those that padded Musk's own bottom line. And even after strutting out of the White House in May, the government checks keep rolling in for Elon. Multi-billion-dollar NASA and Space Force launches, Pentagon AI toys, defense satellites, and now Starlink beaming data for border surveillance. Public service has never been so profitable for some people. And then there's New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Trump's DOJ dropped federal corruption charges against Adams early in 2025 after a memo from Deputy Attorney General Emile Bove claiming prosecuting the mayor would prevent him from assisting federal officials in deporting immigrants. 7 DOJ attorneys resigned in protest, calling it a quid pro quo. And of course, we can't neglect to mention Ghislaine Maxwell. Maxwell met with Deputy AG Todd Blanche in July, reportedly offering information on 100-plus Epstein associates. The implication? Cooperate and maybe get a pardon, or at least a transfer to a cushy minimum security prison. Never mind the fact that sex offenders aren't even eligible to be there. There are many other examples of peddling influence and trading favors so far during Trump 2.0. High-dollar donors and loyalists regularly earn the right to make policy and federal employment pitches. Think Laura Loomer. They benefit from deregulation policies. Think the entire fossil fuel industry after Trump's energy czar, Doug Burgum, removed drilling restrictions on the National Wildlife Refuge in Alaska. And they receive pardons. Think of all those January 6th insurrectionists. These sketchy transactional relationships belong on a street corner rather than in the White House. Applebaum calls this the personal patronage racket of authoritarian regimes, and Trump's racket is definitely gold-plated. But folks, I have saved the most egregious arm of the authoritarian corruption monster for last, because this kind of corruption tears down the very framework on which our country was founded. The sixth arm of corruption is constitutional subversion. Back in Trump's first presidency, he openly called for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution, as if our founding document were an apprentice TV contract he could rip up mid-season. Now, in 2025, he's not just talking about shredding constitutional norms, he's doing it. Let's not forget that he has been greatly assisted by our corrupt Supreme Court and Republican members of Congress. Trump reinstated Schedule F, which allows him to purge the federal government of nonpartisan civil servants and replace them with political loyalists. This is a direct assault on the constitutional principle of checks and balances. Because without a politically independent civil service, the executive branch has now become Trump's personal fiefdom. Trump has ignored Supreme Court rulings, arrested his political opponents, and turned the Justice Department into a revenge squad. Equally disturbing is the way Trump treats Congress, not like a co-equal branch of government, but more like the audience at one of his rallies, there to clap, not to question. He's flat out ignored congressional appropriations by withholding disaster relief funds from states that don't toe the MAGA line, because apparently helping Americans after a natural disaster now requires political loyalty. When Congress allocated billions for climate initiatives and public health, Trump just shrugged, and funnel the money into its ever-expanding border surveillance and immigrant deportation machine instead. Tariff hikes, military deployments, all done without congressional approval. And apparently, the Republicans in Congress think this is totally okay. Applebaum spells it out in Autocracy Inc. Modern autocrats don't just violate their constitutions, they methodically dismantle them, clause by clause, until nothing's left but an authoritarian playbook written in Sharpie pen. This is the final piece of the autocratic puzzle. Constitutional subversion isn't just a side effect of corruption, it's the ultimate goal. Dismantle the safeguards, destroy checks and balances, and pave the way for unlimited, unaccountable power. So there it is, the six-armed monster of authoritarian corruption terrorizing our country. Kleptocracy? Check. Abuse of power? Check. Election fraud and voter suppression? Check. Peddling influence and trading favors? Check. Nepotism and cronyism? Check. And constitutional subversion? Check. Trump's regime has openly flaunted all of them. And don't forget, we're not even a year into his presidency yet. So, the question is, what do we do? Do we keep treating all this as politics as usual? Or do we call it what it is, organized corruption under an authoritarian regime? If you're listening to this podcast, you know where I stand. This isn't just about Trump, it's about the future of democracy. We already bought our ticket to Autocracy Inc. in November, when 77 million Americans elected a convicted felon to lead our country. This may be just wishful thinking on my part, but I still cannot believe that most Americans want this for our country. So now we've got to beat back the monster. How? Well, we pay attention to what's going on, even through all of the distractions and all of the noise. We trust ourselves. That twinge in our gut, it's telling us this isn't normal. We're not okay. Our country is not okay. And we protest. We expose the corruption and we don't stop talking about it. We don't let the authoritarian corruption monster become the norm in American governance. And I wanted to suggest we read Applebaum's book, maybe twice, and we talk about it with other people, because in the age of Trump, truth is resistance. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Rogue Resistance. There are 4 ways you can help us build this all-volunteer effort. Subscribe and tune in to every episode. Like us, post a comment, and share the link on your social media. I'd love to hear what you think about Anne Applebaum's book, Autocracy Inc. So until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay indivisible.